Welcome, everybody. This is a study session, Tuesday, March 27th, 2018. Let's do roll call, please.
Mayor Mingarelli,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Orr,
Here.
Councilman Blair,
Yes.
Councilman Good,
Here.
Councilman Lamerson,
Here.
Councilwoman Scholl. Here. Councilman Sischka.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. We are without a sound system up here at the moment, but I'm sure we will get it figured out momentarily. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have two items on the study session today, and we do have public comment cards back here. So please grab one of those if you'd like to speak to one of the two items, and get those up to the city clerk, and we'll do public comment after the presentations. So first up, we have heart monitoring chief.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. In just a little bit of background, in 2016, faculty members from Franklin Pierce Physical Therapy Program reached out to the Prescott Fire Department concerning a research opportunity they were interested in pursuing. Over the course of many months following this initial contact, Prescott Fire Department worked with those representatives to arrive at a research topic for which they will be sharing their findings today. As most are aware, firefighting professions vary arduous work, and with that, for consistently over many years, cardiac type events have been paramount leading cause of firefighter fatalities, both specifically line of duty deaths. As the leader of Prescott Fire Department, I feel it's critical to utilize science in our decision-making process, and with that, we've worked with the researchers to come to some terms today, evaluating some of our current employees as far as their cardiac preparedness and how they react under some of the austere conditions in which they're faced. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Donald Shaw, professor with Franklin Pierce University, along with assistant professor and doctoral candidate Megan Rode, to share their findings based on their research which utilized Prescott Fire Department employees. Dr. Shaw.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the council, visitors, fellow citizens, it's a joy to be here today to share with you the data that we have gathered on the Prescott Fire Department. Let me tell you how I'd like to proceed. First of all, let me call to your attention, you have before you really an overview of all of our data, and it's a 40-page document. I don't expect you to read it, but should you have questions, you may find it helpful as a referral source. But may I indicate that we have just a short time, and in that short time, I want to do just a couple of things. First of all, I want to give you a little background. I want to go from that background and tell you how we arrived at some of the questions that we addressed. We're going to talk about the methods involved with those questions. We're also going to talk about results, and then we're going to make some summary comments. I will be followed by Dr. Rode, who will be talking from her background really as a tactical physical therapist, and I think her insights will be very helpful as well. Okay, I direct your attention to the slides. The research team, as it finally ended up, was Chief Light, Chief Lucas, Dr. Rode, and myself. And the background has already been touched on by Chief Light, but I think more than just the touch, there's a little bit more here. We received in 2016 at Franklin Pierce a small grant to purchase a Holter monitoring system. For those of you unaware of a Holter monitoring system, it's a device that is a tape recorder for your heart. And we can get as many as 24 hours worth of heartbeats in it, over 80,000, even up to 100,000 beats in 24 hours. So it's full capture and full disclosure. We can see every beat of anyone's heart, and we can correlate that with an event, perhaps, that occurred to see just exactly what the effect of that event was on the heart rate response. Soon after we got the equipment, I was on the phone with Chief Light, and then very soon the team was joined by Chief Lucas and my colleague, Dr. Rode. We finally came up with, and I have to lay this squarely at the feet of our two chiefs, two questions that they felt were very important relative to the Prescott Fire Department. Question number one, What can 24-hour continuous cardiac monitoring tell us about firefighter responses to job stress? And second, what can 24-hour continuous cardiac monitoring tell us about firefighter cardiovascular health and fitness? And actually, I have to say, other than getting over laryngitis, excuse me, I have to say that this was a very salient choice. Obviously, some thought had gone into this because, as the chief has already outlined, sudden cardiac death is the leading cause of on-duty death among firefighters. 55% of firefighter deaths in 2007 resulted from stress or overexertion, precipitating either heart attacks or strokes. During the same period, the majority of deaths occurred in firefighters over 45, although it's interesting here, 19 deaths occurred in those under 45. The risk of a firefighter dying during or shortly after fire suppression is 10 to 100 times higher than during a non-emergency call. Heart rates observed immediately after an alarm, as well as those documented approaching a fire, can range from 150 beats to 188 beats per minute, at least according to the data that we consulted. Heart rates during sleep are often tachycardic. Just a little vocabulary here. Tachy means fast. Cardiac means fast beating heart. So our firefighters, even when they're trying to sleep, studies have demonstrated, and the majority have, that they are tachycardic at rest. In other words, they're in the fight or flight mode when they're trying to sleep, with heart rates ranging from 100 to 120 beats per minute. So when are they not stressed? Well, the bottom line is, for most studies, never. Just by way of a side note, we did some work with the Avondale Fire Department in the Phoenix area. And we actually monitored them on practice fires when they went in and were extinguishing the fires. They were in for an average 15 minutes. And if we look at their heart rate responses just for that 15-minute period of time, 7 of the 9 firefighters had heart rates in excess of what we would consider their maximal attainable heart rate by motor-driven treadmill testing. So they were at supermax levels within 15 minutes of being on the fire. Now, we don't fight fires every day, thank God, but you can imagine it doesn't take too many of these over too many years for there to be a profound effect on the human body. How did we do this? We had the Holter monitor device. It's just a little tape recorder that you see on your left there. It hooks up as would any 12-lead ECG device for the most part, and then it gathers data that we can later dump to a laptop and analyze. We don't have to analyze it, thank goodness the software does, and it tells us whether or not we should be concerned about what we're seeing. Concomitant with the gathering of the ECG data was the necessity for firefighters to keep a diary. So they could have a high heart rate, but why? We wouldn't know unless they had a diary responsibility as well. All of the diaries are presented in the back of the summary that you have. Some of the comments are fun. Some of them are very serious. But the point is, we now have an idea about a typical day for many firefighters here in the Prescott area. This is a sample Holter report. This is on one firefighter. I don't want to read the whole thing. It will probably be of limited value in that regard anyway, but I want you to know that we can tell a great deal, not only about the rate of the heart, okay, it's the number of beats that it's generating in a minute, but we can also determine whether or not there are changes in the morphology or the actual shape of that ECG or that waveform that might give rise to suspicions regarding ischemia or lack of blood flow through coronary arteries that may precipitate a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. We were also then able to gather graphic data. Both of these are examples of abnormal beats that we were able to gather from the Holter monitor reports. SVE simply means supra. Supra means above the ventricles. That's what the V stands for. And ectopy. E for ectopy simply means something occurring where it shouldn't, like an ectopic pregnancy. So beats that occurred that were not normal in the upper portion of the heart were then gathered, as well as those VE, ventricular ectopic beats. Remember, the ventricles don't generate their own beat normally. It waits for the signal from the top part of the heart, and if we're getting them from the lower part of the heart, that's worthy of further follow-up. The results very quickly, we had 23 males, 2 females. The average age was 38. If we look at the average lowest heart rates, wow, 49.6. If a regular heart rate is 72 to 80, when they're at 49, that's pretty impressive. Pooled average heart rate, 82. In other words, even though they were on duty, their rates were no higher really than what we'd expect in a normal population. And then in terms of pooled highest heart rates, 148. Again, that's not very high for the average highest heart rates attained. We were able to gather total complexes on average. We gathered 80,000 separate beats and on average for those 24 firefighters. And the very encouraging thing is where you see percent SVE, percent VE, these are just the number or the percent of abnormal beats, either supraventricular or ventricular. So less than 1% of the beats that we were able to gather on all firefighters, with the exception of just one, were well below what we'd expect to find in something more high risk such as this. Tachycardic episodes, meaning high rates, yeah, you're going to have high rates if you're responding to a fire or responding to an EMS call or if you're working out. And remember, this is not just firefighter on the scene data. This is data that we attained the whole 24 hours that they were at the firehouse. All right, the results. Heart rate responses to fire calls. This was interesting. Remember, Chief was really interested in this. The heart rate responses to fire calls were 126.8 beats per minute. And they were higher, therefore, by 10 beats than we would expect anyway. But certainly from the standpoint of EMS calls, it appears that fire calls render a little higher response. And that makes good common sense to me. Average resting heart rates were within normal limits, 82. We talked to you about the bradycardia rates, 49. And I want to make a special point here. The average lowest heart rates were bradycardic probably because of the high level of cardiorespiratory fitness. 14 of the 24 firefighters that we gathered data on actually recorded heart rates during the time that they were exercising. In other words, if they weren't busy fighting a fire and doing the chores in the firehouse, they were taking care of their health. And that's darn impressive. Average highest heart rates were tachycardic. But well below a participant's age predicted maximal. In other words, if I took all the ages and determined what their predicted maximal heart rate would be, they were almost 40 beats below that. So again, while we didn't have any structure fires that they had to handle, we did have one vehicle fire, but most were EMS calls. So it would be good to repeat this at a time when they were in the fire, and we could gather the data then, and we'd probably see higher rates. But overall, during the day, their responses were pretty normal. Treadmill exercise produced the highest single heart rate, okay? So somebody was exercising during the cardiorespiratory workout, that gave us the highest heart rate. Heated discussion between 2 firefighters produced the highest non-exercise heart rate. So remember, I told you what they write down, we record, okay? And we told them fair is fair, and their informed consent basically gave us permission to do that. We had one participant, and I think this is very important, that did have an abnormal finding. This individual was referred to his physician, and I found out more information about that, but the news is very, very good. The firefighter's heart was apparently in fine shape, and for some reason we just had a transient run of abnormal beats. So we caught something, okay? And we also found that there were some individuals who tend to have a little higher rates and little higher rates of ectopy than others. Now, to finish this out, we had 2 questions, please recall. The first was, what can 24-hour continuous cardiac monitoring tell us about firefighter responses to job stress? Well, heart rates during sleep, normal daily activities, and fire EMS calls were lower than previously recorded or reported by other researchers, namely Barnard and Duncan, who did the first study in this regard, Fernall, Alzadi, and others. Early findings that firefighters are generally tachycardic while on the job was not duplicated in the present study. However, firefighters did not engage in any structural fires during the time that we monitored them. Question number 2. What can 24-hour continuous cardiac monitoring tell us about firefighter cardiovascular health and fitness? 14, and I mentioned this already, 14 of the 25 firefighters engaged in endurance exercise activities while being monitored. Both formal and informal exercise participation seem to be positively affecting firefighter cardiorespiratory health as observed by heart rate responses and waveform responses alone. Overall, those monitored appeared to be very heart healthy and appeared to be a very fit group. We recommend continued emphasis be placed on the importance of daily exercise following American College of Sports Medicine guidelines. And I finish with this, and then it's Dr. Rohde's turn. Every day, I get up as a university professor, I leave my house, I go to my university, I write a paper, I teach students, I look for service opportunities, I come home. Every day, a firefighter, when he's on duty, comes in, he's kissed the kids, he said goodbye, he walks out for the normal day's service, and we don't know whether he's ever going to come back again. Did we have a reason to work with these fine people? We sure did. It wasn't rocket science for us. If we can help these men and women who every day lay their lives down for us, we're there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Good morning, good afternoon. Sorry, I had a baby 2 weeks ago, so I'm kind of, my days and nights are a little screwed up. My background is in actually strength and conditioning. I was a strength and conditioning coach before I went to PT school. I have been involved with several different fire departments up to this point. And the big takeaways that I hope you guys walk away with today is that we have a really fit fire department here in Prescott. I work at Franklin Pierce and Goodyear, but I actually live here in Prescott and have an office in Red Tail CrossFit, and stations 71 and 72 frequent our 8:30 class. So these guys are kind of near and dear to me personally. Dr. Shaw is absolutely right. We go to work every single day and we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Those people who are in the fire service and in the police service have no clue what their day is going to entail. I think this is a great opportunity for us within Prescott to extend this not just to fire, but also to the police department. I would love to see some of the same data with them. Specifically with the fire department, we have a really unique department in that we have a wildland and city interface, which requires a little different training for our fire department. Some of the people that were involved in this study were gone last spring on wildland assignments, so we didn't get to complete data on the entire department, which I would love to see at a later date. As Dr. Shaw mentioned, there was no structural fire suppression while they were being monitored. The most exciting thing, if you want to call it exciting, with the exception of a vehicle fire, was the active shooter situation that we had last April. That was the first day that we were collecting data. And that was really phenomenal data to be able to get. I would love to repeat this study during a controlled burn or a training burn. I'd love to extend this to the wildland crews and see what happens with wildland. It's very, very different. These guys are hiking a long time. They're very, very close to fire, so their heart rates may be different. In addition, while we see that these men and women appear to be very heart healthy, all we're doing is looking at their cardiovascular fitness. And firefighting is more than just heart health. It's lifting, pushing, pulling, dragging. And while the American College of Sports Medicine does a great job of suggesting what we should do for daily exercise, the National Strength and Conditioning Association has also guidelines for strength and conditioning that fall specifically into the tactical realm. So tactical being police, military, and fire. And there are guidelines for strength, cardiovascular conditioning, flexibility, and functional fitness that we have not even begun to look at. So I think that this study laid great groundwork for us to get to know the department, to get to work with Chief Lucas and Chief Light, and work out some of the bugs in a pilot study that always end up to be there. And I think we have years of future research. The top two things that I would like to continue with the Prescott Fire Department would be, number one, to repeat this study and hopefully get the entire department rather than just 23 firefighters involved. A larger sample size sometimes will yield better data. I'd like to also look at this from a controlled burn standpoint and find out what actually does happen when we're going into fire suppression, similar to what we did with Avondale. And then finally, one thing that Dr. Shaw touched on briefly is the psychological component of firefighting. As you guys have in your handouts, we did keep diaries, and the diaries were less than complete, we'll say that. Some of them did a really great job of writing down what their duties were, but nobody really talked much about how they felt. And I think conducting a focus group with some of the people who were involved in this study will help to give us an idea of what the psychological component is that comes with firefighting, in addition to strength and conditioning and endurance. So thank you for your time. That's my son. So, and if you guys have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Just one more slide. I direct your attention to the screen again. Every serious study generally has a moment of levity. And when you are asking people to write in a diary, well, let me just share it with you. This is the best diary outtake, okay? Occurred one of the days that we were doing our monitoring, and the diary entry is 1,900 hours, and it goes like this. Leftover spaghetti was gross. I passed and went to Arby's. So it's good to know that your firefighters are normal as well. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Shaw and Dr. Rode, first off, on behalf of the men and women of the Prescott Fire Department, I thank you for the research, and I do continue to hope we have other opportunities to explore that. And with that, Mayor and Council, if you have any questions, we'll try to entertain those, but I know we have other items to press on for, so.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Oh, this is on. Questions, comments from the council?
Well, I guess I do have a question. Chief, so then if you wanted to do a further study, will you be applying for grants to do something like that, or?
Well, I think there is a collective opportunity here between Franklin Pierce University and the City of Prescott Fire Department to explore those financial perspectives to aid in their research while collectively providing us the opportunity to learn more from science. I totally embrace the using science to make healthy choices in human resource management. And the more we know about the particulars of our profession, the better we can do in preparing our people for longevity in the profession.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Councilman Good?
Congratulations on your son.
Chief White, what kind of conclusions did you draw, if any, from this pilot study?
Well,
there was a lot of data collected, but as far as conclusions or recommendations to your staff, it seems like there was an indication that continued physical fitness seemed to have a real benefit, but other than that, I didn't see a whole lot of steps that you could draw from it to produce better results for your staff.
Well, one of the takeaways for myself, as much as I think from a professional garnering, was, we participate in what's called the Gherkin testing, which is a submaximal cardio output testing, which we do annually for all our firefighters assigned within the PSPRS system. One of the takeaways for that is submaximal may not be representative of what we need to do for our future testing. We may want to go to maximal testing. One of the outtakes from this is in the rest period following maximal work, oftentimes folks will show cardiac arrhythmias. So I think that is an opportunity for us to perhaps address on the front end how we manage our fitness in-house to take it to the next degree, which would involve maximal testing versus submaximal testing. So that would be one of my lead takeaways. I think the other thing is, we continue to monitor our personnel. We do annual physicals. We do both the fitness, the health, and the wellness, along with behavioral. And I think for a successful health and wellness program, it needs to be all-encompassing. So that would be my 2 takeaways.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you all for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to discussion on the ordinance to prohibit smoking in city parks. And like I said, if you would like to comment, there are comment cards back there. Get them up to the city clerk, and you will have 3 minutes for your comments. So who's up here?
I could probably lead this off, Mayor. My expectation is this would be a dialogue amongst council members about the pros and cons of implementing a smoking ban in the public park system. I've had enough interest from some of you to warrant a discussion of that magnitude, or some of you have brought to my attention your desire to see this. Others of you have expressed some reservations about the ability to enforce it, and are we creating an undue burden on our staff? And really the reality is, at this point, whatever you guys decide, staff can do is going to do the best job to try to implement and manage. We're not going to create the smoking police. It's not realistic, nor is that, I think, the intent of the council, any of you. It's also certainly, there are instances where I think banning on smoking during fire seasons we already have in place, but having it year-round wouldn't hurt from a fire perspective. It's really just a determination that you guys need to make amongst yourselves if this is something we want to get in the business of doing, and staff will do the best job it can to do whatever you guys decide.
Okay. Fair enough. I know when I'm approached with an opportunity to create more rules or laws, I'm usually very hesitant initially. And as you mentioned, enforcement of these new ordinances. On the other hand, it's important that we create environments that are healthy for our children and others. And we do know the effects of secondhand smoke. And so it's important that we keep that in mind as well as we approach this topic. So we can open it up for discussion, and then we'll go to public comment. So questions or comments, I guess comments from the council? Anybody want to jump in there? Councilman Good, you're
I'll
hitting the button
volunteer.
here.
I've kind of monitored the progression of these banning activities over the last decade or more. Looking at some of the scientific data, I think there's a reasonable case to be made for secondhand smoke in confined environments, workplaces, etc. I've seen virtually no legitimate studies supporting outdoor banning because the claim that it impacts health in a reliable manner, I think, is almost non-existent. I agree with you that adding additional laws and ordinances that aren't justified on a evidence-based basis are something I would avoid. They need to be properly justified, and any other ordinance that we pass needs to be enforced. And if we're not prepared to spend the money and the staffing to enforce an ordinance, we're just creating more laws that people ignore. And I would like to keep those laws that are passed enforced so that we do have a respect for rule of law, and we don't become selective in what laws we choose to obey and we choose to ignore. So until smoking is made illegal overall, I think those who choose to continue to participate in it have a right to do so, as long as they don't directly impact other people. I think in most cases this is probably more annoyance than anything else, and people who are annoyed certainly have the same ability to go somewhere where they're not annoyed. So it's kind of that controversy where my right to be free of connection with somebody else's right ends where your fist hits my nose. So I just think that this is probably a bit premature, and before I would support it, I'd have to see much more evidence. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilman Siska.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief Bonnie, would it be imperative on your department to enforce this?
Thank you. It's a good question, Councilman Shishka. I think it would depend on how the ordinance was drafted and what the expectations that this group set of how the city approaches enforcing it and handling complaints that would be associated with that ordinance.
Mayor, I can help
Let
answer
me
that.
ask you this. Can you hold on for a second? Let me ask you this. So we ban smoking in, let's say, Granite Creek Park, and there's a homeless population that likes to smoke, and so, okay, as well as others, not just the homeless. So officer goes over, says, well, you can't smoke here. Officer leaves, light up. Officer at some point comes back. What does he do after that?
Well, it depends on what
Or
the
what
ordinance.
does she do after that?
Depends on what the ordinance states. I would imagine in this case it would likely be a civil violation that would probably amount to a citation that could occur.
And I can help answer that. The draft ordinance that's attached to your materials, it's a civil fine. $25 is the current, and that's not changed. So the ordinance amendment that's before you just adds the places that smoking is prohibited. City parks and park systems, and the definitions in there. The first offense is a $25 fine. Because it's a civil offense, it can be done by what's called code enforcement. Obviously, we have one sort of formal code enforcement person. However, the ordinance, when we amended it, allows the city manager to designate other city employees or city staff as for code enforcement purposes. Generally speaking, it's sort of for subject matter experts. A building inspector could be designated code enforcement for building code violations. Engineers could be designated code enforcement. So in this case, you could have park staff or park rangers, for instance, designated as code enforcement for this limited purpose. I also encourage you, and I'm sorry I got to you late through Tyler, I sent it to Tyler late, is there's a study or a document that was emailed to you probably this morning, a 2014 document it was a comprehensive analysis on smoke-free parks. You have it on an email. And the studies in that, if you look, say that for the most part, most places, most cities that have no non-smoking parks or beaches, most of it's self-enforced. People, if they see a no smoking sign, for instance, they're going to tend to follow the rules. Obviously, not everybody. So, and I think that would be the case here, to be honest with you. People, if you see a no smoking sign, people, especially smoking, people tend to follow the rules. So a lot of it's self-enforced as long as there's good signage is what the study shows. So there'd be a good, and like I said, unfortunately I didn't get it to you till this morning, but it's a good document to read, and it talks about really the three bases of non-smoking ordinances in parks. One is the health concerns of secondhand smoke, and it does cite a Stanford study that talks about outdoor smoke. There's a proximity issue. The second is litter and fire, sort of environmental concerns. And the third is they talk about modifying social norms, basically making smoking kind of unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So it's a good document to read for future reference. And obviously, it got to you late. I apologize for that. But so it does talk about those topics, and I suspect I would defer to Joe that. Cigarette butts are probably a litter problem in parks, as they are in a lot of places where smoking is prevalent. Mm-hmm. It's a good document to read. But the other thing I would point out, by the way, in the ordinance draft, is it's currently drafted broadly, and I kind of did that intentionally. It includes e-cigarette vaping, as well as chewing tobacco, and so it's basically sort of a tobacco-free ordinance as it's drafted now. Obviously, as Michael said, it's your sort of call as you go forward, how you want to, if you go forward and adopt something, how you want to massage it. But, it's sort of drafted in definition-wise in its broadest form, so I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, well, it sounds like it's a whole lot cheaper to hire a sign than it is to hire somebody else to enforce this thing.
Yeah, and usually in those cases, if there is a sign, others will point it out to someone who is smoking, in that case too, like, hey, this is a no smoking area. So this was a good document. I didn't get a lot of time around it. I was surprised at how many municipalities have adopted something in regard to no smoking in parks.
It's also interesting, it sort of cuts across sort of political landscapes in terms of non-smoking. It's not just California or New York City. It's pretty broad in terms of the 200-plus cities, and a lot of beaches obviously are non-smoking. If you've been to California, well, everything in California is non-smoking, but but Florida and New York, and so there's a lot, and again, if you take this at face value, it says 70-80% of respondents say it's self-enforced. That there's very little citing or warnings, and citations are few and far between. So I guess the other thing I want to. It's a very relatively small fine of $25. I suspect that would be sort of a last resort, like most of our code enforcement. A citation of some sort is in code in our policy, our practices. It's a last resort, and it's very infrequent, I think. So we try to get compliance with code enforcement, basically.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, well, I understand, Councilman Good, what you're saying about to pass an ordinance that we can't absolutely guarantee 100% that everybody's going to obey. However, we spend a lot of time and money and effort on our parks and our trails, and we were just noted as the number 9th place in the nation for well-being. And I'd like to see us promote that a little more. And I think it's important, I, for one, have asthma, so I cannot be around smoke. And I don't care if you're 5 feet from me or 10 feet from me, I avoid. And I know a lot of kids today that suffer from that. So I would really like to see us pass this, look at the language, make it something that's can be. I do think the self-enforcement, I will tell you, if I see a sign that don't do this, I usually don't do that. And I think most people are the same. So I think it would be a good way to promote health in our community. So I've talked to Joe about the cigarette butts laying around, and certainly there are some parks that have more than others. And Pioneer Park, people, they're up there playing pickleball, they're running on the trails or whatever. Most likely you're not going to see a lot of smoking in some of those parks. However, some of the others where people are just hanging out, I think that we will make a difference there. So I, for one, would like to see something so that we would stop at least the smoking and the vaping. I don't know about all of the tobacco. I'm open for some ideas on that, but certainly I would like to see children, families be able to go to our parks and not be exposed to smoke.
Thank you. Councilman Blair.
Well, I can see both sides of the coin on this thing, but one thing I think it aggravates me more than anything is the fact that just this last week I was at Goldwater Lake on the trails and also on the Constellation Trail. And anybody that's out there getting exercise, hiking, smoking a cigarette is probably having the reverse effect they really want. But I think that we have to educate people. And when you have trails, they should specifically say no smoking allowed, period, on the trails. People got to pick them up. I picked up 15 off the Constellation Trail last Thursday. From my standpoint, it's not necessary. There's no need for it. In other places like Granite Creek Park, we need to still have education and designation on signs that say no smoking in this park except for a designated area. Then designate that area. I think that's a good way to handle those bigger parks and places where people may want to smoke, but I think we need to make sure that our signage is clear and concise. I'm not so sure about chewing tobacco. I mean, I don't see cans of Copenhagen laying on a trail, even though it might be a disgusting habit, which I had for 25 years and haven't had for the last 10. I know that people do have those habits, and that's their choice. But I think that people that are out there walking on trails, and if they're behind somebody that's smoking in front of them, it's hard to get away from that stuff. So from my standpoint, I think that we can clarify those needs of not smoking and make it very clear to people. And I think education is signage, and also putting specifically on the signs where you can smoke in areas designated as. Yeah, Yavapai Regional Medical Center is a health facility. You know, they called it a no smoking campus and then decided they needed to have a place for those that did smoke. So now they have 2 designated areas on the campus to smoke. And people that are allergic to it, I can guarantee you, they're not sitting there watching them. So they have their own space, and I think we need to be, conscious about that too.
Thank you. I did a mountain bike ride last weekend, and we came back to the parking lot, and there was a guy smoking 10, 15 feet away, and the 3 of us had to move our conversation because the smoke was blowing right into our faces, and so here we are out mountain biking out in the woods, and, we were inconvenienced because of that. But thank you for that, Councilman Lamerson.
Thanks, Mayor. I kind of go online with Blair on some of this stuff. But you know what? You ever stand in line in front of some woman that's wearing this obnoxious perfume that eat the inside of your nostrils out? There's a lot of things that pester me. All right, just sharing it with you. Anyway, one of the things that pesters me is, as a society, which the community of Prescott is, we're a society, we chose to restrict my private property. We took a vote of the people in this community that banned anybody from the privilege of smoking in my store, or from me having an interrelationship with my customers or them with me. That's what we did. And I think it's pretty arrogant as a community to say it's okay to smoke on the city's property while we stole it from the citizens that own property in the city. Solely because I'm open to the public. Nobody forces anybody to walk into my store. All right? No, any more than anybody forces anybody to go into a park. That's a matter of choice. So from my perspective, I don't have a problem posting someplace no smoking. I post my store, no smoking. If you don't want to come into my store, you don't have to. I also posted no guns. I'm a jewelry store, for God's sake. Fact of the matter is, I have a right to post my property. I asked the attorney earlier, we're a municipal corporation. With that is an inferred private property right. We, the citizens of Prescott, have a private property right. We, the citizens of Prescott, elected a board in representative democracy to represent the majority of the people. Whether I agreed with the smoking ordinance or not wasn't relevant. What is relevant is the majority of the people in the city of Prescott elected to restrict people's private property that are open to the public in the way of a business from having smoking in their businesses, their restaurants, their hotels, etc. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Thank you. Councilwoman Scholl.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree quite a bit with Councilman Blair. I think there's a workable solution, and we need to be careful about disenfranchising an entire group of people, those being the smokers. They have a right to smoke as well, and I think there's a solution in terms of maybe designating smoking areas. An example that comes to mind is Disneyland. There's smoking areas inside Disneyland, and it works. So I think we can make a solution that really helps everyone, and we're not disenfranchising people from hanging out, especially in those parks where people come to congregate and to hang out and have a good time, maybe for half a day or so.
Thank you. Councilman Sishka.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Bonnie, can I get back to you? Would you mind just telling me what kind of pressure this would put on your police department, if any?
Well, again, it would really depend on what expectations this group set of us. I would say that if the expectation was that people contact the police department with, directly with concerns about smoking, with the expectation that we address it immediately, and I think that could be an undue burden on our people. I don't think we have the staffing nor the time to do something like that. We would likely recommend something in terms of working cooperatively with code enforcement, maybe creating some type of a hotline that people could call, so that we could address things as they come up. But for somebody to call and say, there's somebody smoking right now in Granite Creek Park, and expect us to respond to that, I think would be unrealistic.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilman Lamerson.
Thanks. Chief, you're on the hotline today, aren't you?
I won't sit down again. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. Here again, we post every street in the city of Prescott, it seems like, with a speed limit sign, don't we? Has it worked? Nah. Can you enforce the speed limit 24/7, 365? Nah. Does it help? Yeah. So I agree with Blair and Alexa down here. We put the signs up. Move on.
Thank you. And Councilman Blair.
Yeah, just a real quick reverse comment, I guess. Many years ago, I worked for the city of Prescott, and at that time, we thought it would be pretty cool to be dog friendly. So what'd we do? We put dog bags for your dog litter pickup at every public park, including parks where my kids are sliding on the grass in the outfield. What a bad idea. So what did we do to keep them from doing that again? No dogs allowed in park, and you took the bags away. So in reverse, if we're going to have a park where we allow people to smoke, Joe, how hard is that in our parks to have a designated area? What would the cost to the city be to create an ashtray disposal area in a place where people can smoke in a park? Let's use Granite Creek Park as an example.
Yeah, the thing I don't know is whether or not we'd be required to provide shade, if there's requirements set out. If there aren't any of those onerous requirements, it really wouldn't be a big deal.
Because I think it's important, again, that you spell it out specifically to the people of what their obligation is or their obligation is not. And if we don't do that, shame on us. So I think we need to be crystal clear about what we're doing here.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I got another comment. I just abhor the concept of social engineering. I think governments exist to protect individuals for things that they can't do, police, fire, etc. But to step in and start to create ordinances to change people's behavior because they're less than courteous is not a legitimate function of government. And I just hate the concept of government expanding to try to control social behavior. And I certainly see this as one of those examples. So I'm against this.
Councilman Lamerson.
Thank you. Here again, I don't think we need an ordinance. Just put up the signs. Move on. I mean, what's a sign? It says no smoking. That's what a sign does. It says no smoking. People are going to pick and choose what they're going to do. They do it all the time. Whether it's breaking the speed limit, going up Willow Creek Road 70 miles an hour, you can go out any day of the week and see it. Can we enforce the ordinance that we already have on the books? No. You just heard the chief say we can't be all things to all people all the time. That's the way it works. You got honest people, and you have people that aren't. That's the way life goes.
Any other comments? All good comments. We're going to go to public comment, and remember you have 3 minutes, and there's a little light here to help you know when you're done. So, Maureen?
First one is Ralph Hess.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Couple things. I want to supplement some of what Councilman Good said and amend maybe some of the ideas of Councilman Blair. But first, in looking at the ordinance, I've reviewed this ordinance, and it appears that there's no legitimate rational basis for the breadth of this ordinance. at the beginning, you talk about section 7.3.1 when it talks about the purpose, and this addresses Councilman Good's point, is that the purpose of this section of the code is to recognize the positive danger of health and material annoyance, inconvenience, discomfort, and health hazard to those who are present in confined spaces. What you're addressing with regard to this ordinance is open spaces. And so you're now trying to preclude people from smoking in open spaces, and I would suggest that there's no rational reason to do that. These parks are wide open. If you're concerned about cigarette butts, you have littering provisions, codes that can be enforced to address the littering aspects. With regard to what Councilman Blair was saying, it would seem more rational to designate non-smoking places within the parks. For instance, it might be reasonable to say you can't smoke in gazebos or what are the other covered spaces that you have in the parks, or the bleachers, for instance, at the baseball fields or softball fields. The places where people are going to be stuck next to each other and be subject to that smoke, that might have a reasonable basis. But to say that the people who are over and playing volleyball in Granite Creek Park need to be protected from the people who are sitting over there by the bridge smoking, I think is unreasonable. And with regard to the penalty for this, I'm looking at Section 5 of the proposed ordinance, and it says that any person who violates the provisions of this chapter shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. And upon conviction thereof shall be punished as provided in Section 7-3-8B. Now, I didn't have the ability to look that up while I was sitting here, but it's a misdemeanor to me is a criminal offense, not a civil offense. So criminalizing people's habit of smoking in open spaces seems unreasonable. And also it lends itself to disparate enforcement. So I would propose you oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gregory Allen.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman. My name is Greg Allen. I was raised here until I was 21 years old. My dad was a county agricultural agent here for 25 years. I've just recently returned. I just wanted to make a couple comments. In 2013, I got a call from the Coronado Island Hospital emergency room, and my wife was in the hospital, and she had gone into a asthma-type attack where her lungs completely shut down. She had gone that evening to visit, to a site on Coronado, and somebody started smoking on the street, and within 2 minutes, her lungs completely shut down. Since that time, this has occurred at least 6 other times that we've had to go to the hospital, had 3 to 4 breathing treatments. If we were lucky, and several times we've had to spend as much as 2 weeks in the hospital before she in intensive care before she recovered. So to say that smoking in open spaces doesn't affect people is 100% wrong. The reason it affects people, it doesn't affect you if you have good lungs, and I can understand it being a nuisance or something, but it does affect you if you have asthma or some type of pulmonary problem. I can understand people who enjoy smoking, that they've had that habit for a long period of time. They don't want to lose it. I enjoy sugar. My wife tried to take sugar away from me. I hated that, and I ignore her for it. But still, the difference is me taking sugar doesn't affect other people. Smoking does affect other people, and to even start to say that it doesn't is 100% wrong. Whether you're in the whether you're in a park or you're in a closed place, it does affect you. In 2013, the 2 women that took my wife to the hospital in Coronado went to the mayor. They passed the ordinance in Coronado that there is no smoking on the beaches, on any of the public streets, any right-of-way within the city of Coronado, they do not have it. It's you don't have to enforce it. You put the signs up and it's enforced. I've gone to the parks there for 18 years, to the parade there for 18 years. I've never seen a soul smoke on there. I talked to Officer Ray, who is one of the lead officers of the Coronado Police Department. He's never given a citation for someone smoking. I think, you put the signs up, that's all I want to see. People will respect it. There will not be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brent Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for giving me a few minutes to speak. I agree with Greg also. I did a little bit of studying. I gave you guys some material that I passed out. I'm not going to go over all of it because in 3 minutes I won't have time. But they did studies with ANSR and ACAS, which I got a lot of information from. Being 3 feet away from someone smoking can trigger asthma, increased risk of blood clots, and hurt blood vessels. So these are studies that I received from this organization. I also found out, I didn't know the last time when I came here and spoke, that the city of Clarkdale, Douglas, Goodyear, Miami, San Luis, and Somerton have no smoking ordinances in their city 100%. There are 844 municipalities in the United States that have 100% smoke-free parks. I talked to the mayor, a friend of mine who's a mayor, and I asked him in California about their smoke-free thing, and he says it doesn't have any burden on the police officers, because when you're standing there and someone's smoking, you say, hey, I've got kids here, do you mind not smoking? And they usually respect it. It's very, very few times that someone's belligerent and is going to start fighting over smoking a cigarette. So it's not going to put anything to the police department. Everyone says it's not enforceable, but it does give us a voice, those of us who don't smoke. And those people who do smoke, it's going to help them, hopefully kick the habit. It's a nasty habit. I just found out in 2016, Maricopa County has banned smoking in all county-owned properties. I've been in the park here, and there's people who are drinking alcohol. And I've asked them hey, you guys can't drink alcohol. You're not supposed to. And they've got up and left. They're obviously visitors from down. And there's been people who have been drinking. And I've asked them, hey, you're not supposed to be drinking. Here, go to the bars and drink. I've called the police one time, and they never showed up, but the people left. So the officers have better things to do than to police all this. I think as citizens, we can do that ourselves and help. But I believe, again, we are another thing is I found out that the average person smoking spends $2,000 a year on smoking, and on New York it's $5,000. That's a lot of money to be spent on something that's actually destroying them and destroying. And again, with my wife, was also hospitalized about a month ago because of someone smoking and vaping in the parks. Again, thank you, and I hope you guys vote to make this an ordinance.
Thank you.
Daniel Matson.
Good afternoon. As many of you know, I'm a homeless advocate. And so I myself, I quit smoking 32 years ago, and I'd be happy to not encounter smoke in the park. But let's face it, there are a lot of people who are addicted to cigarettes. And the poorer people don't have a house to smoke in. They don't have a car to smoke in. They're going to smoke somewhere. As far as the fire suppression idea, if you outlaw smoking in all the wide open parking lots and dirt areas around the parks, they're going to go out into the woods. So that's going to have kind of a negative effect. I like the idea of some designated smoking areas. Keep it well away from the areas that these gentlemen's wives would be in. Keep it off the trails. I think that's a great idea. But some of the parks where people hang out during the day, I don't think it would hurt at all to have areas where smoking is acceptable. I do think the signs are going to go a long way toward keeping people from doing it. And I think if we and it wouldn't be that hard to put a coffee can over there and, let's think this through a little, though, because I do think it's going to fall most heavily on those who cannot afford to have a good place
And there are a lot of people who are very much addicted to cigarettes. I quit 33 years ago, and it was not easy. And if you're addicted and you're under stress and all that, you really don't need to have no place at all where you can stop and have a cigarette. And also, if we ban it in all city parks, then where the homeless are going to go to protest that is onto the town square, where we'd rather have them not hanging out there anyway. So I think this can be done in an intelligent way that won't be a burden on enforcing, and will allow a lot of people who worry about the health effects to enjoy our parks, and still have people be able to sit off to one side. When we have our feeds during the summer in Tom Pettit Park, it's going to be a big hassle if I have to tell anybody there's no smoking anywhere in the park at all. But I could probably easily say, how about you smoke over here and over there, and the rest of the area no smoking. So that's kind of what I would rather see, is let's keep an area or two that's off to where people can avoid it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Adele Plotkin.
Hi there. Y'all kind of know me. Kind of. It's actually Rabbi Dr. Adele Plotkin. What's the doctor? It's quantitative genetics. I have degrees in biophysics, chemistry, and I'm not even going to list all the other scientific ones. Take it for a fact, I'm a hardcore scientist, as well as a rabbi. Mr. Good, thank you for denying my existence. I exist. I am the evidence. I am the rational basis for why smoking outdoors is very detrimental. Like his wife, I stopped breathing. This is what I have to walk with everywhere I go. It's both a filter for particulates and a filter for organic vapors, but it's not for staying in a dangerous situation. It's for getting out before I keel over. It is not a right to smoke. It is a privilege granted to people by common agreement of other people who might be affected. It is not a right. The health impact outdoors maybe hasn't been well studied, but you know very well you can smell a barbecue, even at a fair distance. That means that smoke hasn't disappeared. The laws of physics say there is a very gradual dispersion of whatever's airborne. Now, if the wind's blowing, it's going to be faster, sure. And you better not be downwind if you got my condition. I cannot go in the summer to do folk dancing at Granite Creek Park because of the smokers. And it doesn't matter if they're on the volleyball court or if they're over by the bathrooms and so on and so forth. Oh, the bathrooms. If you do a designated area, please don't put it by the bathrooms. Okay, so this is not an annoyance for me. It's a life and death situation. I should mention, I also can't take drugs, medications, because of my disability, which means oxygen is the only thing they can give me if I go and stop breathing. There's also a question of tobacco trash toxicity. Tobacco originally was used as a pesticide, and the tobacco residues could be acting as that, well, they're toxic to a lot of things. The people who worked the tobacco fields used to get rashes, very toxic stuff. It's also a fire hazard, but I think we've all touched on that before. I worked with train stations in the greater Washington, D.C. area where they had smoking on the platforms. Finally got them, the federal government in charge, to designate a smoking
Excuse me,
area.
Rabbi,
if you could wrap it up here, your time's up.
Sure. They designated it in the handicap ramp. Okay. If you designate and you have the signs, it gives us something to say that is usually effective. And by the way, the homeless have been more polite to me than many of the other smokers.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Mayor, if I can respond.
Sure.
I certainly did not deny your existence, Rabbi, and I respect your education and especially your scientific education and your respect for the scientific process and evidence-based decision-making. But I'm also a strong proponent of freedom and liberty. I think the case you're making, and it's a strong case, is for making smoking illegal from a public health perspective. But until it's illegal, it's allowed, and I don't believe government should step in and take legal activities and socially engineer them. So if you or the other speakers are supporting changing the legality of smoking, quite frankly, I'd support you. But until then, I'm a believer in limited government and freedom and liberty for the individual, and I'll fight to the death for that.
Thank you. Next comment.
Sandra Smith.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Most of you know me as well. Like Councilwoman Orr, I also have asthma. I've had it since the late 60s, early 70s. As I get older, I get more easily triggered, I find, which is not uncommon. That's actually a common pattern with asthma. When you go out in public places and people are smoking, it may not seem like the smoke is that concentrated, but it doesn't take that much. And as we get older, and there are a lot of older people in this town, it takes less to trigger a serious event for us than it did when we were younger. The CDC tells us in their reports that the incidence of asthma in children is increasing radically. And part of this, they say, is due to tire particulates, among other things. But tobacco is one of the primary triggers. Now, I agree that smokers have a right to smoke, and outdoors is probably a better place for it than indoors for anybody. But I also think that designating areas where smoking can be enjoyed and other areas where the smoke is not going to affect our ability to enjoy the outdoors as well would be a fair solution for everybody. And I think if you're going to designate areas, yes, please don't put it near the bathroom, but set a ramada or a shady area where they can smoke too. Big tree, And of course, the fire hazard is major, so let's watch for that. Be sure that there's something out there for them to put the butts in, not the grass. But other than that, I think, unfortunately, the incidence of environmental illnesses in general, of which tobacco and even fragrances, many of the fragrances, those vapors things, yikes. Somebody sat down by me when I was waiting for a taxi at Walmart, smoking one of those things, and I about stopped breathing right there. I don't usually get that tight. So some of those are just as bad as the nicotine itself. They need to be segregated. Everybody needs to be able to enjoy the outside. We all need the outdoors. We need that connection with nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bernice Carver.
Hi, thank you for considering this issue. There's a lot of people that it affects.
I'd like to start out by saying that I'm a retired health educator from Coconino County. I do have breathing issues myself, and I have committed myself over the last few decades of helping people to quit tobacco. And sometimes it's been really hard having them in the room, having it on their clothes, and being able to breathe at the same time. But I've helped thousands of people quit smoking, and I have really thrilled with the changes that it has made in their lives. And my life, too, watching them succeed and gain their self-esteem and be healthier and alive. I brought this flag today. This flag was given to me by the Veterans Administration to put on my husband's coffin, who died of lung cancer from secondhand smoke. Both my kids have been in the hospital in the ER for going into anaphylactic shock. One of them was in an outdoor area in a line who was exposed by some secondhand smoke. And I'm sorry I can't say where it was because I signed a confidentiality agreement to get our hospital bills paid for and his treatment paid for. I can't tell you where that is, but it's a very common place. My daughter was in a shopping mall. Same thing happened to her. She ended up in the ER. She was 8 years old. And the mall was a pretty big place, but somebody walked by her with a cigarette and blew it right in her face. And both my kids were taught to hold their breath around cigarettes, but if there's already smoke there and you go like that, oh my God, we all know what that's like. The tobacco industry is 44% of the profits from the tobacco industry come from mentally ill people that are addicted to smoking, and the tobacco industry does what they can to keep them addicted. They have targeted certain groups of people. Veterans are one of them. And more veterans have been killed by tobacco than any of our enemies in any foreign country. More veterans have been killed, more Americans have been killed than anybody in any war, any catastrophe by the tobacco companies. Last year, over 7 million people worldwide were killed by the tobacco companies. 480,000 people a year die in the United States from smoking. About 50,000 people a year die from secondhand smoke, from breathing it secondhand and passive smoking. And as far as chew tobacco goes, 62,000 people a year die from cancer from chew tobacco, from spit tobacco, and about 200,000 people die of heart and vascular disease from spit tobacco. And about 30 years ago, Flagstaff Unified School
Please
District—
wrap it up. Your
Okay,
time's
thank
up,
you.
yeah.
They went tobacco-free, and there was this same argument everywhere. Rights, the tobacco industry came in wrapping themselves in the flag, and veterans and all these other people. But we went tobacco-free 30 years ago, and it has worked wonderfully. They put up signs.
Thank you
They
for your
never had a
comments.
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick Lyford.
It's my first attempt at public speaking, so I don't know how well I'll do. But I'm an asthmatic, and I've lived here in Prescott my whole life. And it's becoming worse and worse and worse. Everywhere you go, there's somebody smoking a cigarette. And it's not an annoyance. It's not an inconvenience. It's a matter of life or death for me. It puts me in the hospital again and again and again. I'm in that ER all the time from breathing somebody's secondhand smoke. It's not, something that's good or okay or a good habit. It needs to go away. It needs to go away forever, from everywhere, every place. No one should be smoking. No one on this planet. And it's not like it's a new thing. It's been my whole life that I've known this, and everyone has known this, all of our lives, that this is a rotten, terrible thing that needs to go away, like cancer. It's something that's totally preventable. So let's just crush it out. Make it go away. Make it illegal in the entire city, and be the first to start in this Arizona, and be a good, clean town, not this cigarette smoke horrible place. Thank you.
Hey, Rick, I'm glad I look younger than you.
You don't. You're really fat.
Thank you.
Judith Merrill.
Thank you. I would love to see all kinds of tobacco use forbidden in this town for all the reasons that they've already spoken of. And so I'm not going to repeat those. But I do want to say, if you decide to allow it in some places, signs are an important thing that will help. I think no smoking signs in a lot of places. I think limiting the sign smoking to automobiles at trails ends. I think it's terrible at trail ends to go in, find people smoking and throwing their butts down, and you take the trail and you follow them along. It's terrible. But even if they don't smoke on the trail, I don't want them smoking when they get off the trail or when they get on the trail, so that we who are using the trails have to encounter that. So I would love to see smoking only in their cars if they go to the trails. Something people haven't really spoken about is, since we moved here, there must have been a cost to the city of smoking, a serious cost, because I've seen a number of fires put out in Granite Creek Park especially. And since that seems to be an area that has major smoking problems, I don't know. I'm glad you're there and I'm here. But something needs to be done about that to prevent the recurrent fires that we have had there. One danger I can see is that if the homeless are not allowed to smoke where the homeless smoke, they may go into the forest, and that might make the fire danger even more significant. I know I live off of Ridgewood, and they just cleared, the city must have spent a lot of money clearing out homeless encampments there. There were obviously lots of truckloads of trash going out of there. I know must have been a serious fire danger in that area, and I'm glad that whoever approved of the expenditure of that money. So I can see that there would be a danger chasing them to places where where a fire would be less accessible. Also, I noticed my reaction to this $25 fine is that these people are not going to be able to pay that fine. And then, so it's a nothing. They can't do that. So that seems to me something that is sort of illogical in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it, Mayor.
No more public comment? Anything else from the council on this topic?
I figured we probably, from staff, need some direction. Is there the majority opinion that we should either eliminate smoking or designate smoking areas in parks? Where are we at?
Right. We'll kind of let everybody maybe quickly speak to that. Councilman Lamerson, do you want to go?
Yeah. Notice I keep pushing the buttons and I don't know what's going on.
I saw you. I got you.
Yeah. Here again, I really think the prospect of a designated smoking area, the prospects of posting signs, most people are cognizant. Not everybody's irrational. You're going to get a few here and a few there. But I think if you designate areas for certain behavior, the opportunity for the behavior to occur 100% is a lot less. So I don't have a problem with people smoking, as Phil was saying. It's a freedom of choice. I don't care if they kill themselves. That's not for me to tell them that or not. But on the other hand, it's like everything else. It's a personal liberty. I can't just go drink anywhere I want, anytime I want. There's designated areas, designated times, blah-de-blah, whether it's a vehicle, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are restrictions that are applied for different behaviors. And that's what we're looking at here is behavioral. So I don't have a problem with people smoking, just not everywhere.
Okay. Thank you.
I support that. Same thing.
Other council members?
again, it's cheaper to hire a sign.
So signage and designated locations is what the majority is looking at this point.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I would just say, I don't think this is social engineering. We're seriously talking about citizens wanting to use properties that they help pay for through their taxes, whether it's a trail that we purchased or a city park that we maintain. And, I certainly could go with designated smoking areas. But I will tell you, I would like them to really be confined and away from, I agree with, I think it was Judith Merrill that said, at smoking at the trailheads, outside, I don't think that's a good spot. So maybe in the cars, I don't know. I just think it needs to be really confined where they're allowed to smoke, because the parks should be pretty open air for everyone. And it is a health issue. I agree with many of the speakers that spoke. So.
Yeah, it's good to hear from the public, and there are quite a few health hazards for people in regard to secondhand smoke. Seems like limiting it to smoking as well and not being quite as broad. I know you did that intentionally to just leave it open for the council, but and I would support, particularly in larger parks like you mentioned, Councilman Blair, that if there were places that made sense for a designated area, if there's a big party and there's one or two people that want to smoke that are a part of the Ramada party, they can go off somewhere and smoke, in that designated area.
Looking for areas to be designated that limit the inconvenience of the rest of the people that are in the park, right?
Here's what I would then recommend: is we can work up it would, in my view, it would require an ordinance, because the parks or the recreation director or the city manager really don't have the authority anywhere in the code to designate the park as non-smoking other than where we're allowed. So my recommendation is still to go forward with an ordinance. And then I in terms of designating smoking areas, I think in the ordinance we could say, except as otherwise designated by the city manager or his or her designee, and then it can be designated at a
Joe's
recreation
discretion.
director or city manager level. I don't think you want to get into sort of mapping out smoking areas in certain places, and it may be, and again, it may be in certain parks there's a designated smoking area. At trailheads and others there may not be, because of, again, the fire hazard, and other issues. It may be too small to have a smoking area. So I think the route to go on that, my recommendation is to defer that to a staff level. Sure. And then that's easy to adjust. If it needs to be bigger, smaller, moved here, there, it can be done without sort of city council action. So it allows for some flexibility. So that's my recommendation. We can certainly bring something back.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Scholl?
I would like to also see us include vaping as part of smoking.
Definitely.
If we're going to do...
It's in there.
Okay.
I read it, and can we add marijuana to that too?
Currently, it's to address that question, Mayor. It's unnecessary, because currently, even if you have a medical marijuana card, you can't do it in public, and even in states that have legalized recreational marijuana, you can't do it in public. Just like drinking, it's pretty limited. So, but a couple of things I think really need to be for the record is our parks don't ban drinking. I mean, there are certain parks that allow for drinking. That was brought up. Right. And second of all, it needs to be made very clear that this does not apply to the courthouse square. That is not a city park. So I want to make sure that's very clear, that if this thing proceeds forward, that that's county. It's a county park. It's actually designated as a county park and would not apply to courthouse square, the grassy area. So if just lest anyone think, their expectations are going to be they're going to go down to the courthouse and not have smoking, that wouldn't be within our jurisdiction. I want to make that real clear.
Yeah, and just to remind our audience, we'll keep our comments just during public comment, if we could, please. Mayor Pro Tem?
I just wanted to say, I think this is, once this ordinance is adopted, I'm sorry that Ralph Hess left, because we weren't specifically speaking to some of the language there. It was just, you had just put this out for some suggestions. But I think this needs to be revisited and see, maybe we need to make a few changes going forward.
So I guess going forward, do you want to do it in another study session or bring it to a voting meeting? It's really up to you. I don't need to study it anymore.
No.
You're ready to vote, right?
I think so, yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other comments from the council? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you at 3 o'clock.